welcome back after an ECM heavy match there between Test Alliance, Please Ignore, and Northern Coalition. Ryload, we have seen today that the ban meta has been heavy towards ECM, a lot of ECM bans, and our Test brings a heavy ECM team and loses, double Widow, double Blackbird with Deacon support. Tell me about ECM teams. How do they work in the Alliance tournament, broadly speaking? What are you afraid of? What do you want to see? What do you not want to see?
Right, so ECM teams in general are a control setup, which basically means you want to control your enemy in things that they don't want to do. So basically, ECM teams are usually to stop people from targeting too far. So usually this will usually be focused on mainline DPS ships or support ships or logistics. Depends on the scenario, but it's usually the logistics is usually the one that's it's going to be the focus on. The things you don't want to see are usually armor-based setups where there's a lot of remote sensor boosters. Obviously, ECCM and sensor boosters got combined together now, so that ECM has actually been a little bit nerfed even more, but it's still really strong. The reason it's strong is because targeting range scripts from damps and tracking disruptors are banned. So ECM is now coming into play. So it's pretty interesting to see this heavy ECM meta bringing on the first weekend. So.
Yeah, moving from 12 to 10 pilots as well. The less targets you have,
definitely.
The less targets you need to jam, so the more likely you are to jam out the entire team, so they have no effectiveness. Now, going on from there, we should probably talk about racial speaking as well. If you have a one-race team, if you bring an ECM team, unless you know what your opponents bring, you have to spread your jams across all four races. And this is what we saw in the Northern Coalition team. They had representatives from each race there, which meant that Test could probably put the correct racial jams on the correct racial ships. You were mentioning earlier that Lumpy had a match where you had a bunch of Kaldari jams and they didn't bring any Kaldari ships. And that was a bit difficult for you. Rocket, what's your thoughts on the ECM meta in the tournament? Are you a big fan of watching ECM games, or not really your cup of tea?
Not really, no. I've always I've been playing E for a long time, and back in the day when you used to have remote rep battleships and that sort of thing, I like to see kind of in and out of a tournament setting, just people duking it out, having a DPS race, playing with the Logi and that sort of thing. But in an ECM kind of matchup, especially when both teams are pretty heavily ECM based, you get a situation where they've both jammed each other and there's only a couple of ships that can lock and there's no real damage going anywhere until they finally get a dice roll where someone loses the dice roll, and then they'll lose a ship, and then you have to wait for the next thing to happen when someone else loses the dice roll again.
In that case, the Svipple was unjabbed.
I
managed to kill the Deacon.
Yeah, and that ended up being the linchpin, and then the whole thing fell apart from there. But I mean, it is good to watch when stuff actually happens, but you have to wait for that dice roll to fall south in order for anything to move forward with the match. And it lasted almost 10 minutes, didn't it?
Because ECM teams are usually quite low DPS as well, because you have two different types of ECM. So you've got armor ECM, which is lots of jams in the mids, but they're quite weak type of jams, but you just got lots of them. While the shield setups usually have very little jams, but they're quite powerful. So you've got this mismatch of jam power versus jam amounts. So that's also something to look into.
Yeah, a bit of local news for the stream. We have hit 6.6k viewers, making us the 15th most watched stream on Twitch. EVE players are forming an incursion to the Twitch community. Hide your League of Legends, hide your Dota 2. EVE Online is on the way. Let's talk about the next upcoming match, which is going to be Hard Knock Citizens versus Out of Sight. I'm quite excited about this match. Hard Knock Citizens were a very, very strong team last year, surrounded by a lot of hype. Hard Knocks have lost a few of their pilots to Tuskers this year, but they're still going to be very strong. Then Out of Sight as well. Not the strongest of teams, still a very good core team that you can expect to win a few matches before coming out of the tournament. Reload, why don't you tell us a bit about what we saw from Hard Knocks and Out of Sight last year in terms of how strong they were? They were pretty strong. I think they only got knocked out by Exodus in the loser brackets final, I think. Something like that, yeah. Yeah, and they brought the very standard TFI cores that were quite popular in AT13. Eventually losing to, I think, a mirror matchup against Exodus. Yeah. So moving on from that then, Rocket, now that you've seen the tournament meta for the day, what kind of comps do you think are showing themselves to be the strong ones? What teams do you think are, if you've got a younger team that's maybe planning on looking to participate in the Alliance tournament next year, which I'd absolutely advise teams to consider doing, it's a lot of fun. What kind of comps, what type of archetypes have you seen that you think, this is a really good archetype, look at this one, learn how it works?
Well, I think it's important with any kind of comp that you're going to use, but I mean, if you're starting out, you need to fly at a setup that's reliable and doesn't require you to necessarily fly it perfectly every time. So the flying larger ships as opposed to kiting, sticking with a battleship core. You know, you can either do, at the moment we've seen a lot of Scorpion Navy issues flying around. Balgorns and Geddons have been used quite a bit as well. Obviously there's a banning issue with those. People have started to use those bans pretty effectively. So at least at the moment, more towards missiles. Shields have been pretty heavy. And go for Scorpion Navy shoes is probably the simplest one to go for at this point.
Solid advice. Speaking to you guys now on the stream, do remember to click the follow button to follow the stream for the 36 hours of EVE content or so that we put out each week here at EVE NT. Remember to visit eve-bet.com to place your bets on the tournament throughout the weekend. Tomorrow's matches are already up there. And then I would also like to plug the AT Finals party going on in Selly Oak in Birmingham, England. So if you're a UK resident or if you fancy flying in from another country, you're welcome to come hang out there. The details are on Reddit, on the Evo forums. We're going to have a fantastic time. We've got a massive room booked out in a pub. Come and have a pint with nerds and watch some spaceships. I'll be there. A bunch of other guys will be here as well. It's going to be really, really good. So yes, Hard Knocks versus Out of Sight. The match is coming up in just a few minutes. So let's send this over to the commentators who now are going to be Sir Squeebles and Suitonia.